In the shadows of a plantation attic, a forbidden romance ignites when an enslaved woman teaches the master's daughter to read. As their hearts entwine, a shocking betrayal threatens both their lives. When the young mistress is forced to marry a cruel man, she discovers a devastating family secret that changes everything. Will she sacrifice her only chance at true love, or risk death to follow her heart? You won't believe the heartbreaking choice she must make. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The summer heat hung heavy over Willow Creek Plantation as Eliza Brooks sat alone in her bedroom, staring at the small wooden box on her dressing table. Her hands trembled as she opened it, revealing a bundle of letters tied with faded blue ribbon. They were from her mother's sister, Aunt Margaret, who had passed away when Eliza was just a child. For years, these letters had been hidden away, and now they were the only connection Eliza had to the aunt she barely remembered. If only I could read them, Eliza whispered to herself, running her fingertips over the elegant handwriting. At 21, Eliza Brooks was a beautiful young woman with honey-colored hair and soft blue eyes, but education had never been a priority for her mother. Mrs. Brooks believed a lady needed only to learn proper etiquette, household management, and how to be a suitable wife. A knock at the door startled her. Eliza quickly closed the box and tucked it into her drawer. "Come in," she called, smoothing down her pale yellow dress. Ruth, the enslaved seamstress, entered with a basket of freshly mended clothes. At 26, Ruth was tall and graceful, with intelligent brown eyes that seemed to notice everything. Her dark hair was neatly covered with a simple cotton headscarf, and her hands, though calloused from years of work, moved with remarkable precision. "Your mother asked me to bring these to you, Miss Eliza," Ruth said, her voice soft but clear. "I fixed the tear in your blue dress." "Thank you, Ruth," Eliza replied with a genuine smile. Unlike her mother, Eliza had always treated the enslaved people with kindness, much to Mrs. Brooks' disapproval. Ruth placed the basket on the bed and turned to leave when she noticed Eliza's reddened eyes. "Is everything all right, Miss Eliza?" Eliza hesitated. Sharing personal troubles with the household staff was strictly forbidden, but something about Ruth's gentle expression made her want to confide in her. "It's nothing," Eliza said finally. "Just some old letters from my aunt." Ruth nodded and headed toward the door, but paused when Eliza spoke again. "Ruth, did your mother ever teach you to sew?" A shadow crossed Ruth's face. "Yes, Miss Eliza. My mother taught me everything I know about sewing." "You're very fortunate," Eliza said with a sigh. "My mother never had the patience to teach me much of anything." Ruth's eyes lingered on the drawer where Eliza had hidden the box. She'd seen the letters, and something in Eliza's wistful expression told her everything she needed to know. Later that night, as the house grew quiet, Eliza took out the letters again. The moonlight streaming through the window was enough to help her decipher the words, but she traced the shapes with her fingertip, imagining what secrets they might hold. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Surprised that anyone would visit her room so late, Eliza quickly hid the letters under her pillow. "Who is it?" she called quietly. The door opened slightly, and Ruth peeked in. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Miss Eliza, but I saw your light still on." Eliza relaxed. "Come in, Ruth." "I couldn't sleep." Ruth entered, carrying a small basket of sewing supplies. "Mrs. Brooks asked me to have your writing habit ready by morning." As Ruth set down her basket, her eyes fell on the corner of a letter peeking out from under Eliza's pillow. Eliza followed her gaze and blushed. "I was just looking at them again," Eliza admitted. "They're from my Aunt Margaret. She died when I was very young, and I've always wondered what she wrote to my mother." Ruth hesitated, then spoke in a near whisper. "Miss Eliza, I don't mean to overstep, but I can read." Eliza's eyes widened. Teaching enslaved people to read or write was forbidden by law in most southern states. "How did you learn?" "My mother," Ruth replied, her voice barely audible. "She was taught by her previous master's daughter many years ago. She kept a tattered Bible and taught me in secret." For a moment, Eliza was speechless. Then she reached for Ruth's hand, without thinking. Would you read these to me?" Ruth pulled her hand away gently, her expression cautious. Miss Eliza, if your mother found out. She won't, Eliza promised. She takes a sleeping draught every night and doesn't wake until morning. Ruth glanced nervously at the door. It's too dangerous here. Your mother or one of the other house servants might hear us. Eliza's face fell with disappointment, but then Ruth continued. But there's the old storeroom in the attic. No one goes there at night. Hope flickered in Eliza's eyes. Could we go there now? Ruth hesitated. Being caught alone with the master's daughter in the middle of the night could result in severe punishment, but something in Eliza's pleading expression made her nod. Bring a candle and the letters, Ruth whispered. I'll meet you there in 10 minutes. The attic storeroom was dusty and filled with forgotten furniture and trunks. Eliza arrived first, setting her candle on an old desk. She jumped when the door creaked open, but relaxed when she saw Ruth. I was worried you wouldn't come, Eliza said. Ruth closed the door quietly behind her. We need be quick, Miss Eliza, if we're caught up here. I know, Eliza nodded, understanding the risk Ruth was taking. She handed over the first letter with trembling fingers. Please read it to me. Ruth carefully untied the ribbon and unfolded the yellowed paper. In the flickering candlelight, she began to read. My dearest sister, I hope this letter finds you well. Life in Boston continues to challenge my notions of what is proper and expected. The people here speak of equality and freedom in ways that would shock many of our Southern friends. Eliza listened entranced as Ruth read about a world so different from the one she knew. Aunt Margaret described lectures and books, discussions about the rights of women, and the evils of slavery. Each word opened Eliza's mind to new possibilities. Your aunt had very different ideas from your mother, Ruth observed when she finished the first letter. No wonder Mother never speaks of her, Eliza replied, her voice filled with wonder. Please, can you read another? They spent the next hour in the attic, Ruth reading letter after letter while Eliza absorbed every word. As the night grew late, Ruth reluctantly put the letters back in order. We should return to our rooms, Miss Eliza. It's not safe to stay longer. Eliza nodded, but before Ruth could leave, she caught her hand. Will you teach me to read, Ruth, like your mother taught you? Ruth froze. Miss Eliza, what you're asking. I know it's dangerous, Eliza said earnestly, but I want to be able to read Aunt Margaret's letters myself. Please, Ruth. No one needs to know. Ruth looked into Eliza's pleading eyes and felt her resolve weakening. We would have to be very careful. We will be, Eliza promised. We can meet here after everyone is asleep, just a few times a week. After a long moment, Ruth nodded. I'll teach you what I know, Miss Eliza, but you must promise to never tell anyone. I promise, Eliza said, her face lighting up with joy. That night marked the beginning of a secret that would change both their lives forever. The following evening, Eliza made an excuse to retire early. She waited anxiously in her room until the house fell silent, then made her way to the attic with a candle and a small book she'd found in the library. One with simple words that her mother had used to teach basic household accounting. Ruth was already there, looking nervous but determined. We'll start with the alphabet, she said, taking a piece of charcoal from her pocket and a scrap of cloth she brought to write on. These are the letters that make up all the words we speak. Eliza watched intently as Ruth drew each letter, carefully explaining the sounds they made. For hours, they worked together, Eliza practicing the shapes and sounds until her fingers were smudged with charcoal. You're learning quickly, Miss Eliza, Ruth said with genuine admiration when Eliza correctly identified several letters. Eliza beamed with pride. It's because I have a good teacher. Their nightly lessons continued for weeks. Ruth would arrive with small scraps of paper or cloth that they could use for practice, always careful to destroy the evidence before they left the attic. Eliza proved to be an eager student, determined to master each new concept. One night, as Eliza successfully read a short sentence from the book, she clasped Ruth's hand in excitement. I did it. I really read it. Ruth smiled, a rare, unguarded moment that transformed her face. Yes, you did. Their hands remained joined longer than was proper, and something shifted in the air between them. Eliza felt a strange fluttering in her chest as she looked into Ruth's warm brown eyes. Confused by the feeling, she quickly pulled her hand away. "We should continue," she said, her voice slightly unsteady. As the summer days passed, their midnight lessons became more than just reading practice. They began to talk, sharing stories and dreams that neither had ever voiced aloud. Ruth spoke of her mother, who had passed away 2 winters ago, and her younger brother Thomas, who worked in the fields. "Thomas is so bright," Ruth said one night, her voice filled with pride and worry. "He's only 14, but he's already learned some letters from what I've taught him. I fear for him, though. The overseer watches him too closely." Eliza felt a pang of guilt. "I wish I could help him somehow." "You're already taking a great risk by meeting me here," Ruth replied softly. "Your kindness means more than you know." Their conversations often turned to Aunt Margaret's letters, which Eliza was slowly learning to read herself. The progressive ideas in those letters sparked discussions that lasted until the early hours of the morning. "Do you really believe what your aunt wrote?" Ruth asked one night, after they'd read a particularly passionate letter about equality, "that all people are created equal?" Eliza was quiet for a moment. "I never thought much about it before reading these letters. But now, yes, I believe she was right. How can it be otherwise when I see how intelligent and kind you are, Ruth? You're certainly my equal in every way that matters." Ruth's eyes glistened in the candlelight. "Few white people would say such things, Miss Eliza." "Perhaps more should," Eliza replied simply. As summer turned to fall, their friendship deepened. Eliza found herself looking forward to their nightly meetings with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened her. During the day, they maintained the proper distance between mistress and servant, but Eliza found it increasingly difficult to pretend that Ruth was nothing more than a household seamstress. One evening in late September, Eliza was summoned to the parlor where her parents were waiting with serious expressions. "Eliza, dear," Mrs. Brooks began, her voice artificially sweet, "we have wonderful news. Mr. Carter has formally asked for your hand in marriage, and your father has accepted." Eliza felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath her feet. She'd known this day would come. At 21, she was already considered past the prime age for marriage, but the reality of it hit her like a physical blow. James Carter was 27, the son of a neighboring plantation owner. He was handsome and well-mannered, but there was a coldness in his eyes that had always unsettled Eliza. More importantly, she felt nothing for him. No spark, no connection like the one she'd found with "Eliza, did you hear what your mother said?" Her father's stern voice cut through her thoughts. "Yes, Father," she replied automatically. "It's wonderful news." "The engagement will be announced at the Harvest Ball next month," Mrs. Brooks continued, already planning aloud. "And we'll have the wedding in the spring. I'll need to write to your cousin Emily to see if she'll be a bridesmaid." Eliza nodded numbly as her mother rattled on about wedding plans. All she could think about was how she would tell Ruth. That night, when they met in the attic, Eliza could barely focus on the lesson. Ruth noticed her distraction immediately. "What's troubling you, Miss Eliza?" she asked, setting aside the book they'd been working on. Eliza took a deep breath. "My parents have arranged my marriage to James Carter. The engagement will be announced next month." Ruth's face remained composed, but Eliza saw something flicker in her eyes, pain quickly hidden. "Mr. Carter is considered a good match. You'll be well provided for." "I don't love him," Eliza said, her voice cracking. "I don't even like him." "Love isn't a consideration in marriages like yours," Ruth replied gently. "You've always known you would marry someone of your parents' choosing." "Yes, but—" Eliza struggled to express the turmoil inside her. "These past months have changed me, Ruth. The things we've read, the conversations we've had. I can't go back to being the person I was before." Ruth reached out hesitantly and touched Eliza's hand. "These lessons were never meant to make you unhappy, Miss Eliza." "They haven't," Eliza insisted, turning her hand to clasp Ruth's. "They've opened my eyes. And—" She paused, gathering her courage. "They've opened my heart." The admission hung in the air between them. Ruth's eyes widened with understanding, and for a moment neither woman spoke. "Miss Eliza," Ruth finally whispered, You mustn't say such things. Why not? It's the truth. Eliza moved closer. Don't you feel it too? This connection between us. Ruth pulled her hand away, her expression pained. What I feel doesn't matter. You're the daughter of the plantation owner, and I'm property. That's the reality we live in. Not here, Eliza insisted. Not when we're alone together. Here, we're just two people. But we can't stay here forever, Ruth replied sadly. Morning always comes, and with it, the world as it is, not as we wish it could be. Eliza felt tears welling in her eyes. So I should just accept my fate? Marry a man I don't love while pretending these feelings don't exist? You have no choice, Ruth said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. And neither do I. They sat in silence for a long moment, the candle between them casting flickering shadows on the walls. Will we continue our lessons? Eliza finally asked, afraid of the answer. Ruth hesitated. It would be safer to stop. Please, Eliza whispered. I need this time with you. Even if nothing can come of what I feel, I can't bear to lose these moments. Ruth looked at her for a long moment, conflict evident in her expression. Finally, she nodded. We'll continue, but we must be more careful than ever. If anyone suspects there's something beyond reading lessons happening here, no one will know, Eliza promised. As they parted that night, their hands brushed together briefly, deliberately. It was a small gesture, but it carried the weight of everything they couldn't say aloud. The following weeks brought a flurry of activity to Willow Creek Plantation as preparations for the Harvest Ball, and Eliza's engagement announcement consumed Mrs. Brooks' attention. Dressmakers visited, invitations were sent, and the house buzzed with excitement. Through it all, Eliza maintained a calm facade, playing the role of the happy bride-to-be while her heart grew heavier by the day. Her only solace came during the stolen hours with Ruth in the attic, where she continued to improve her reading skills and share whispered conversations that felt more honest than anything in her daylight life. One afternoon, as Ruth was fitting Eliza for her ball gown, Mrs. Brooks entered the bedroom unexpectedly. "How is the fitting coming along?" she asked, eyeing a half-pin dress critically. "Very well, Mrs. Brooks," Ruth replied, keeping her eyes downcast as was expected. "Miss Eliza will look beautiful for her engagement announcement." Mrs. Brooks circled her daughter, examining the gown from all angles. "The sleeves need to be tighter, and add more lace to the collar. Mr. Carter appreciates a modest appearance in a woman." "Yes, ma'am," Ruth acknowledged, making a note of the changes. As Ruth continued working, Eliza caught her mother watching them with narrowed eyes. There was something in Mrs. Brooks' expression that made Eliza nervous. "Ruth seems to spend a great deal of time with your fittings lately," Mrs. Brooks observed after Ruth had been dismissed. "I've noticed she's often the last to retire at night." Eliza's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "She's very thorough with her work. I requested extra details on the gown." Mrs. Brooks studied her daughter's face. "Just be mindful of growing too familiar with the help. Eliza, it's unbecoming of a lady, especially one about to marry into the Carter family." "Of course, Mother," Eliza replied, relieved when Mrs. Brooks seemed satisfied with her answer. That night, Eliza warned Ruth about her mother's suspicions. "We need to be even more careful. Perhaps we should meet less frequently." Ruth agreed reluctantly. 3 nights a week instead of every night, and we should leave at different times. Their precautions worked, and the night of the Harvest Ball arrived without incident. Eliza stood beside James Carter in the grand parlor, accepting congratulations from guests while feeling as though she were watching herself from a distance. Mr. Carter kept a possessive hand at her waist, his fingers digging in slightly whenever she spoke to another man. From across the room, Eliza caught glimpses of Ruth, who had been tasked with assisting the guests with any wardrobe emergencies. Their eyes met briefly several times, each glance conveying what they couldn't say aloud. Late in the evening, as the celebration continued, Eliza slipped away to her room for a moment of solitude. She was startled to find Ruth there, laying out a fresh shawl. "Your mother sent me to bring this," Ruth explained. "She thought you might be cold." They were alone for the first time that day, and the tension between them was palpable. "How are you holding up?" Ruth asked softly. I feel like I'm drowning, Eliza admitted. Every congratulation, every toast to our future happiness, it's all based on a lie. Ruth moved closer, her voice barely above a whisper. You'll get through this night, and all the ones to come. You're stronger than you know, Miss Eliza. Not without you, Eliza replied, her voice breaking. You're the only thing that makes any of this bearable. Before Ruth could respond, footsteps sounded in the hallway. They quickly stepped apart as Mrs. Brooks entered the room. Eliza, what's taking so long? Your fiancé is looking for you, Mrs. Brooks said, her gaze moving suspiciously between her daughter and Ruth. And Ruth, I don't recall asking you to bring a shawl. Return to your duties downstairs immediately. Yes, ma'am, Ruth replied, keeping her eyes lowered as she left the room. Mrs. Brooks turned to Eliza with a hard expression. I don't know what's going on between you and that girl, but it stops now. You are engaged to be married. Eliza, it's time you started acting like it. Nothing is going on, Mother, Eliza protested, but Mrs. Brooks cut her off with a sharp gesture. Don't lie to me. I've seen the way you look at each other. It's unnatural, and it will not continue under my roof. She straightened Eliza's dress with rough movements. After the wedding, I'm sending Ruth to work in the fields. The distance will do you both good. Eliza felt the blood drain from her face. Field work was brutal, especially for someone like Ruth, who had always worked indoors. Many didn't survive the harsh conditions and ruthless overseers. Mother, please, Eliza began, but Mrs. Brooks silenced her with a cold stare. Not another word. Now compose yourself and return to your fiancé. We have guests waiting. That night, after the last guest had departed and the house had fallen silent, Eliza made her way to the attic with sense of urgency. Ruth was already there, pacing nervously. Your mother suspects, Ruth said as soon as Eliza entered. It's too dangerous to continue meeting. I know, Eliza replied, tears streaming down her face. She's planning to send you to the fields after my wedding. Ruth's composure faltered for the first time since Eliza had known her. The fields? But I wouldn't last a season. I won't let it happen, Eliza said fiercely. Somehow, I'll find a way to stop her. Ruth shook her head. There's nothing you can do, Miss Eliza. Once you're married, you'll have no say in your parents' household. The reality of their situation hung heavy between them. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the single candle casting long shadows across the attic floor. We should say goodbye, Ruth finally whispered. This has to be our last meeting. No, Eliza protested, stepping closer. I can't just give up. There must be something we can do. What would you suggest? Ruth asked, a rare edge of bitterness in her voice. Run away together? Where would we go? How would we live? They would hunt us down, and you know what would happen to me when they found us. Eliza had no answer. The impossibility of their situation crashed down on her like a physical weight. I just can't bear the thought of never seeing you again, she whispered, reaching for Ruth's hand. These past months with you have been the only time in my life I felt truly alive. Ruth's fingers intertwined with hers. I feel the same, she admitted softly, but wanting something doesn't make it possible. They stood together in the flickering candlelight, holding on to each other as if they could stop time through sheer force of will. And then, without conscious thought, Eliza leaned forward and pressed her lips to Ruth's. The kiss was gentle, hesitant at first, then deepening as Ruth responded. For one perfect moment, the world outside ceased to exist. There was only the warmth of their embrace and the mingled beating of their hearts. When they finally pulled apart, both women were breathless. Ruth touched her fingertips to her lips, her eyes wide with wonder and fear. We shouldn't have done that, she whispered. I'm not sorry, Eliza replied, though tears streamed down her face. Whatever happens, I'll never regret this moment. Ruth brushed away Eliza's tears with a gentle hand. Nor will I, but it makes our goodbye even harder. As the first light of dawn began to seep through the small attic window, they reluctantly prepared to part ways. Before they left, Eliza pressed Aunt Margaret's letters into Ruth's hands. Keep these, she said. Hide them somewhere safe. There'll be something of mine you can hold on to. Ruth hesitated, then nodded, carefully tucking the precious bundle into her dress pocket. I'll treasure them always. At the door, they shared one last lingering look. Goodbye, Ruth, Eliza whispered, her voice breaking. Goodbye, Miss Eliza, Ruth replied, a single tear sliding down her cheek. May God watch over you. As they parted, neither woman knew that fate had other plans for them, that their story was far from over. The lessons they had shared in the attic had planted seeds that would continue to grow, even in the harshest of conditions, and the forbidden feelings that had blossomed between them would prove stronger than either of them could imagine. 2 weeks had passed since Eliza and Ruth's tearful goodbye in the attic. The plantation house buzzed with wedding preparations, and Eliza moved through each day like a sleepwalker, smiling when expected and speaking when spoken to, but feeling nothing inside. Mr. Carter visited almost daily now, bringing expensive gifts and discussing their future together, as if it were already decided. Eliza nodded and agreed to everything, too numb to argue. You've been unusually agreeable lately, Mr. Carter remarked one afternoon as they walked in the garden under Mrs. Brooks' watchful eye. I had expected more resistance to moving so far from your family home. What would be the point of arguing? Eliza replied softly, My future is set. Mr. Carter smiled, taking her submission as a good sign. You're learning, my dear. A wife's duty is to support her husband's decisions, not question them. Eliza said nothing, her thoughts drifting to Ruth, whom she had barely seen since the night of the harvest ball. Mrs. Brooks had made sure they were never alone together, assigning Ruth to work in the farthest corners of the house. That evening, as Eliza prepared for bed, there was a soft knock at her door. Her heart leaped with hope, but it was only Mary, one of the younger house servants, bringing fresh towels for the morning. Miss Eliza, Ruth asked me to give you this, Mary whispered, glancing nervously toward the hallway. She slipped a small cloth-wrapped package into Eliza's hand. Thank you, Mary, Eliza replied, quickly hiding the package in the folds of her nightgown. Please don't mention this to anyone. After Mary left, Eliza locked her door and carefully unwrapped the mysterious package. Inside was a small leather-bound book, Ruth's mending notebook, where she kept track of household sewing repairs. Confused, Eliza opened it, expecting to find lists of hems and buttons. Instead, written in tiny, careful script between the mundane entries, was a message. Miss Eliza, I cannot bear the silence between us. If you wish to continue our correspondence, write your thoughts in this book and find a way to return it to me. No one ever looks at my mending records. It can be our secret way to speak when words are forbidden. Our tears filled Eliza's eyes as she read Ruth's message again and again. With trembling hands, she found a pencil in her desk drawer and wrote beneath Ruth's words. Ruth, seeing your handwriting brings me more joy than I can express. These past weeks without our lessons, without seeing your face or hearing your voice, have been unbearable. I feel like I'm drowning in a life that isn't mine. Please tell me you're safe. E. The next morning, Eliza asked Mary to return the book to Ruth, claiming it had been mistakenly brought to her room. Mary, young and eager to please, didn't question the request. 2 days later, the book reappeared among Eliza's clean linens. Ruth had added to their hidden conversation. I am safe, though your mother watches me closely. She has forbidden me from working anywhere near your rooms. I fear what will happen after your wedding. There are rumors that your father is selling some of the field workers to a plantation in Georgia. I worry for my brother Thomas. The overseer has been especially harsh with him lately. How I wish we could return to our attic sanctuary, if only for one night. Their secret correspondence continued for weeks. The mending book traveled between them, carried by unsuspecting servants or hidden in laundry baskets. Their messages grew more intimate, expressing feelings they had barely acknowledged even to themselves during their attic meetings. Sometimes I dream of another life, where we could be together without fear. Is that foolish of me? E. Not foolish, just impossible. But I treasure those dreams too. In them, we are just two women, free to choose our own path. I cannot go through with this wedding. Each day brings it closer, and I feel as though I'm walking toward my own grave. Mr. Carter's touch makes my skin crawl. When he kissed my cheek yesterday, I had to stop myself from pulling away. How can I bear a lifetime of his hands on me when my heart belongs to you? You must endure it for both our sakes. There is no other choice. Remember what your aunt wrote about finding strength in impossible circumstances. You'll find a way to survive this, as I've survived all these years. One evening in early December, as the wedding date grew ever closer, Eliza sat in the parlor with her parents and Mr. Carter, discussing the final arrangements for the ceremony. "I think 50 guests is quite enough," Mrs. Brooks was saying. The Wilsons' daughter had over 100 at her wedding, and half of them barely knew the bride. "Whatever you think best, Mrs. Brooks," Mr. Carter agreed smoothly. "Though I would like to invite some business associates from Charleston. Connections are important, especially with the uncertain political climate." Eliza stared into the fireplace, barely listening to the conversation around her. Her thoughts were with Ruth, who was supposed to return their shared journal today. Mary had promised to hide it among the clean tablecloths. "Eliza, are you listening, dear?" Her mother's sharp voice cut through her thoughts. "I'm sorry, Mother. What did you say?" Mrs. Brooks frowned. "Mr. Carter asked about your preference for the wedding breakfast menu." "I have no preference," Eliza replied flatly. "Whatever you decide will be fine." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Mr. Carter cleared his throat. "Perhaps Eliza's feeling unwell. She seems rather pale this evening." "Yes, I do have a headache." Eliza seized the excuse gratefully. "Would you mind if I retire early?" Her father waved a dismissive hand. "Go on, then. We can finish these discussions without you." Relieved, Eliza hurried to her room, hoping to find a mending book waiting for her. But her bed was empty, the tablecloths neatly folded without any sign of Ruth's journal. Disappointed, she changed into her nightgown and was about to get into bed when a frantic knock sounded at her door. "Miss Eliza." It was Mary, her voice high with panic. "Please, I need to speak with you." Eliza opened the door to find a young servant girl trembling, her face streaked with tears. "What's wrong, Mary?" "It's Ruth," Mary whispered, glancing fearfully down the hallway. Mrs. Brooks found the book. She was checking the linen cupboard, and it fell out from between the tablecloths. She read what was written inside. Eliza felt the blood drain from her face. "Where is Ruth now?" "Your mother had her taken to the shed behind the kitchen. Mr. Brooks is there too, and the overseer." Mary's voice broke. "I heard her screaming, Miss Eliza." Without thinking, Eliza pushed past Mary and ran down the back stairs in her nightgown, her bare feet cold against the wooden floors. Outside, the December air bit through the thin cotton of her nightclothes, but she barely noticed as she sprinted toward the kitchen shed. The sound of a whip cracking stopped her in her tracks. Then came Ruth's cry of pain, followed by her father's angry voice. "You'll tell me what you've done to my daughter, or so, help me God, you won't live to see morning." Eliza burst through the shed door. The scene before her was nightmarish. Ruth tied to a post, her dress torn open at the back, angry red welts already forming on her skin. Mrs. Brooks stood to one side, her face hard as stone, while Mr. Brooks and the overseer loomed over Ruth. "Stop!" Eliza screamed. "Father!" stopped us at once. Everyone turned to stare at her, shock evident on their faces. "Eliza, return to the house immediately," her father ordered, his voice cold with fury. "I will not," Eliza replied, moving to stand between Ruth and the whip. "This is my fault, not hers. If you want to punish someone, punish me." "Don't be ridiculous," Mrs. Brooks snapped. "This slave has corrupted you, filled your head with dangerous ideas." "She taught me to read," Eliza said, her voice steady despite her fear. "That's all. I asked her to teach me, and she did. If that's a crime, then I'm the guilty one." Mr. Brooks' face darkened. "It's more than reading lessons in that book of hers. The things written there." He couldn't even finish the sentence. So great was his disgust. "Those words are mine as much as hers," Eliza insisted. "Everything I wrote, I meant. Every feeling expressed there is real." "You don't know what you're saying," her mother hissed, grabbing her arm roughly. "This isn't you speaking. It's her influence. Once she's gone, you'll come to your senses. Gone, Eliza repeated, her blood turning to ice. What do you mean, gone? I've already made arrangements, Mr. Brooks said coldly. She'll be sold at auction in Charleston next week, far away from here, where she can't poison your mind any further. No, Eliza cried, turning to look at Ruth, who hung limply from the ropes binding her to the post. Father, please, I'll do anything you ask. I'll marry Mr. Carter, without complaint. I'll be the perfect wife and daughter. Just don't send her away. It's too late for bargaining, Mrs. Brooks said. The decision is made. Then sell me with her, Eliza said desperately, because I won't stay here without her. Her father's hand struck her face with such force that she stumbled backward, tasting blood in her mouth. You will never speak such filth again, he said, his voice shaking with rage. Go back to the house and stay in your room. If you try to interfere, I'll have her whipped again right in front of you. 2 house servants appeared, summoned by Mrs. Brooks, and dragged Eliza away despite her struggles. The last thing she saw was Ruth's face, streaked with tears but still somehow dignified, even in her suffering. Locked in her bedroom, Eliza paced like a caged animal, her mind racing. She had to find a way to help Ruth, to prevent her from being sold away. But how? Her parents had made it clear they would brook no argument, and Mr. Carter would certainly side with them if he knew the truth. As dawn broke, Eliza heard movement in the hallway outside her room. Pressing her ear to the door, she caught fragments of conversation between the house servants. Taking her to the laundry sheds, Mrs. Brooks said no one is to speak to her. Poor thing can barely stand after that whipping. The laundry sheds. At least Ruth was still on the property. If Eliza could just find a way to reach her, perhaps they could make a plan. She waited until the house was busy with breakfast preparations, then slipped out of her room. Instead of going downstairs, she made her way to the back of the house, where a narrow servant staircase led to the yard. The December morning was crisp and cold as Eliza hurried across the frosty grass toward the laundry sheds. Steam rose from the large copper tubs where the washing was done, providing some warmth in the winter air. Peering through the shed window, Eliza saw Ruth bent over a washboard, her movement stiff with pain as she scrubbed at a pile of linens. Even from a distance, Eliza could see that her hands were red and raw from the harsh lye soap and hot water. She waited until the overseer's wife, who supervised the laundry, stepped outside to hang some sheets on the line. Then Eliza slipped into the shed. "Ruth!" she whispered urgently. Ruth looked up, her eyes widening in alarm. "Miss Eliza, you shouldn't be here. If they catch you—" "I had to see you," Eliza said, moving closer. "Are you badly hurt?" Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "I'll heal, but you must go before someone sees you. I'm going to find a way to stop them from selling you," Eliza promised. "I won't let them send you away." "There's nothing you can do," Ruth replied, her voice tinged with resignation. "Your father has made up his mind." "Then we'll run away," Eliza said, the idea forming even as she spoke. "Tonight, I have some money saved, and my mother's jewelry. We can go north to Boston, where my aunt lived. There are people there who would help us." Ruth shook her head. "They'd catch us before we made it 10 miles. And the punishment would be worse than anything they've done so far. I can't just do nothing." Eliza cried, forgetting to keep her voice down. "What's going on in here?" The overseer's wife had returned, her suspicious gaze moving between Eliza and Ruth. "Miss Eliza, you know you're not supposed to be out here." "I needed to speak with Ruth about my wedding dress." Eliza improvised quickly. There are alterations that only she can do properly. The woman's eyes narrowed. "Your mother gave strict orders that no one is to speak with this girl, especially not you. I'll have to report this." "Please don't," Eliza begged. "It was just about the dress. Ask my mother if you don't believe me. She's been worried about the fitting." Uncertain, the overseer's wife hesitated. "Well, I suppose if it's about the wedding. But you need to leave now, Miss Eliza. This girl has work to do." Relief flooded through Eliza. "Of course. Thank you for understanding." Before she left, She cast one last look at Ruth, trying to convey all her feelings in a single glance. Ruth's eyes met hers briefly, full of love and sorrow. Back in the house, Eliza found her mother waiting at the foot of the stairs, her face like thunder. "Where have you been?" Mrs. Brooks demanded. "I needed some air," Eliza replied, trying to sound casual. "I've been locked in my room since last night." Mrs. Brooks studied her daughter's face, looking for signs of deceit. "Mrs. Peterson tells me you were at the laundry shed, talking to that girl." Eliza's heart sank. So the overseer's wife had reported her after all. "I needed to ask about my wedding dress," she began, but her mother cut her off. "Enough lies. I've heard nothing but lies from you for months." Mrs. Brooks gripped Eliza's arm painfully. "You are never to go near her again. Do you understand me? If you disobey, I'll have her brother sent to Georgia instead of her." Eliza gasped. "Thomas? What has he done?" "Nothing yet," Mrs. Brooks said coldly. "But that could change very quickly if you continue this unnatural behavior." The threat hung in the air between them. Eliza knew her mother well enough to recognize that she meant every word. "I understand," she whispered, defeated. "Good. Now go upstairs and make yourself presentable. Mr. Carter will be here for luncheon, and we need to discuss moving the wedding date forward." "Forward?" Eliza repeated, stunned. "But it's already set for April. Your father and I agree that waiting is no longer prudent. Mr. Carter has been informed of the situation and has graciously suggested that an earlier ceremony would be best for everyone. The end of December, perhaps just a small family gathering. 2 weeks from now." Eliza couldn't keep the horror from her voice. "Mother, please, that's too soon." "It's decided," Mrs. Brooks said firmly. "Now go upstairs. And remember what I said about the boy." Trapped by her mother's threat, Eliza had no choice but to obey. The thought of Thomas, only 14 and already working the fields, being sent away to George's notorious plantations was too terrible to contemplate. She couldn't risk his safety, even for Ruth. When Mr. Carter arrived, he greeted Eliza with his usual politeness, but there was something new in his eyes, a calculating look that made her skin crawl. "My dear Eliza," he said, taking her hands in his, "your parents have explained the unfortunate situation to me. I want you to know that I understand completely." "You do?" Eliza asked, confused by his apparent sympathy. "Of course. Young women are impressionable, easily led astray by stronger personalities." His grip on her hands tightened slightly. "As your husband, it will be my duty to guide you back to proper behavior. I'm quite looking forward to the challenge." The thinly veiled threat behind his words made Eliza's blood run cold. This man, whom she was now to marry in just 2 weeks, intended to correct her like a disobedient child. "I'm not sure what my parents told you," she began carefully, "but—" "They told me enough," Mr. Carter interrupted, his voice still pleasant but his eyes hard. "Let's not speak of it further. I prefer to focus on our future together." Throughout the meal that followed, Eliza sat in numb silence as her parents and Mr. Carter discussed the hastily rearranged wedding plans. It was as if her life had been taken out of her hands entirely, her future decided by others without any regard for her feelings. After Mr. Carter left, Eliza retreated to her room, claiming a headache. She lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, trying desperately to think of a way out of her impossible situation. If she tried to run away with Ruth, Thomas would suffer. If she married Mr. Carter, she would be trapped in a loveless marriage with a man who clearly intended to break her spirit. And regardless of what she chose, Ruth would be sold away unless she found a way to prevent it. As darkness fell, a soft knock at her door roused Eliza from her thoughts. It was Mary again, her young face troubled. "Miss Eliza, I have a message," she whispered, glancing nervously down the hallway. "From Ruth." Hope flared in Eliza's heart. "What is it?" "She says to tell you not to worry about her, that you should do what your parents want and marry Mr. Carter." Mary hesitated, then added, "She also said to tell you that she's hidden something in the attic under the loose floorboard by the north window. Something for you to remember her by." Tears filled Eliza's eyes. "Thank you, Mary. You're very brave to bring me this message." Mary nodded, looking frightened but determined. Ruth has always been kind to me. I don't think it's right, what they're doing to her. After Mary left, Eliza waited until the house was quiet before slipping out of her room. The journey to the attic felt fraught with danger. Every creaking floorboard seemed loud enough to wake the entire household. Finally, she reached their old meeting place. The attic looked abandoned and forlorn in the moonlight that filtered through the small windows. Eliza made her way to the north window and found the loose floorboard Mary had mentioned. Underneath, wrapped in a scrap of clean cloth, was a small package. Eliza's hands trembled as she unwrapped it, revealing Aunt Margaret's letters and a folded piece of paper. Unfolding the paper, she found a message in Ruth's careful handwriting. My dearest Eliza, by the time you read this, we will have been separated. I want you to know that no matter what happens to me, the time we spent together in this attic was the happiest of my life. You taught me that love can exist even in the darkest places, and for that, I will always be grateful. I return your aunt's letters to you. Keep them safe, as a reminder that another world is possible, one where women can speak their minds and hearts freely. I have added something else as well, something I've never shown anyone. It is yours now, to keep or destroy as you wish. With all my love, Ruth. Beneath Ruth's message was a poem, written in her hand, but unlike anything Eliza had seen from her before. It spoke of forbidden love, of hands touching in darkness, of words written between the lines of everyday things. It was beautiful and heartbreaking, a declaration that could never be spoken aloud. Clutching the precious papers to her chest, Eliza wept silently in the moonlight. She had never felt so helpless, so trapped by circumstances beyond her control. The next morning, Eliza was awakened by unusual commotion in the house. Dressing quickly, she went downstairs to find servants rushing about, her mother giving orders in a sharp, agitated voice. What's happening? Eliza asked one of the passing maids. It's one of the slaves, miss, the girl replied hurriedly. The seamstress, Ruth. She's missing. Eliza's heart leaped. Missing? Since when? Since before dawn. The overseer went to the laundry shed to fetch her for work, and she wasn't there. They're searching property now. Hope and fear battled within Eliza's chest. Had Ruth attempted to escape on her own? If so, the consequences would be severe when not if she was caught. Throughout the day, the search continued. Riders were sent to neighboring plantations to spread word of the runaway. The overseer's dogs were set on Ruth's trail, and Mr. Brooks offered a substantial reward for her return. By nightfall, there was still no sign of her. Eliza overheard her father talking with the overseer in his study. She can't have gotten far, the overseer was saying. Not with those injuries from the whipping. My guess is she's hiding somewhere on the property, waiting for a chance to slip away. Double the night watch, Mr. Brooks ordered. Check every building, every shed, every possible hiding place. I want her found before she can cause any more trouble. That night, Eliza lay awake, torn between hope that Ruth had somehow escaped and fear for what would happen if she was caught. The sound of the search dogs barking in the distance made her shudder. 3 days passed with no sign of Ruth. The house remained in an uproar, with Mrs. Brooks becoming increasingly agitated. This makes us look incompetent, she complained to her husband over breakfast. What will people say if we can't even control our own slaves? She'll be found, Mr. Brooks assured her. No one escapes alone, especially not a woman alone. Eliza said nothing, pushing her food around her plate without eating. The strain of the past few days had left her pale and hollow-eyed. You need to eat, Eliza, her mother scolded. You'll be nothing but skin and bones for your wedding at this rate. I'm not hungry, Eliza replied listlessly. Mrs. Brooks narrowed her eyes. You wouldn't happen to know anything about Ruth's disappearance, would you? How could I? Eliza asked, meeting her mother's suspicious gaze. I've been watched day and night since you found the book. Before Mrs. Brooks could respond, there was a commotion outside. Through the dining room window, Eliza saw a group of riders approaching the house, led by the plantation overseer. Her heart sank as she realized what this must mean. Mr. Brooks rose from the table and went outside to meet them. Eliza followed, unable to stop herself, needing to know Ruth's fate. In the yard, the overseer was dismounting from his horse, looking grimly satisfied. "We found her, sir," he announced, "hiding in an abandoned cabin about 5 miles north of here. And—" Mr. Brooks prompted. The overseer's expression changed, becoming oddly uncomfortable. "She's dead, sir." Eliza felt the world tilt beneath her feet. "No," she whispered, her voice lost in the sudden roaring in her ears. "Dead," Mr. Brooks repeated, clearly taken aback. "How?" "Fever, looks like," the overseer explained. "The cabin was flooded from the recent rains, and she was lying in water and mud. Must have gotten sick and been too weak to move. The wounds on her back were infected something terrible. Eliza couldn't breathe. The thought of Ruth dying alone in a flooded cabin, sick and in pain, was unbearable. She swayed on her feet, darkness creeping at the edges of her vision. "Eliza!" Her mother's sharp voice seemed to come from far away. "Pull yourself together." But Eliza couldn't. As the full weight of Ruth's death crashed down on her, she collapsed to the ground, darkness claiming her completely. When she regained consciousness, she was in her bed, Dr. Wilson bending over her with concerned expression. "There she is," he said as her eyes fluttered open. "You gave your parents quite a scare, young lady." Eliza turned her face away, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks as memory returned. Ruth was gone. The one person who had truly seen her, truly understood her, was dead, and it was her fault. If she hadn't asked Ruth to teach her to read, if she hadn't written those dangerous words in the mending book, none of this would have happened. "She's still very upset about the slave girl," Mrs. Brooks was saying to the doctor. "They were close." Dr. Wilson frowned thoughtfully. "Well, she's young and sensitive. It's not unusual for ladies to form attachments to their servants. Give her a few days of rest, and she'll be herself again." But Eliza knew she would never be herself again. A part of her had died with Ruth, leaving a hollow space that nothing would ever fill. In the days that followed, Eliza moved through life like a ghost. She didn't resist when her mother insisted on continuing with the wedding preparations. She stood silently for dress fittings, nodded when asked questions about flowers and music, and greeted Mr. Carter with empty politeness when he visited. Inside, however, she was drowning in grief and guilt. At night, alone in her room, she would take out Ruth's poem and Aunt Margaret's letters, the only tangible reminders of the woman she had loved. One afternoon, a week after Ruth's death, Mary appeared at Eliza's door with strange expression on her young face. "Miss Eliza, there's something I need to tell you," she whispered, glancing nervously down the hallway. "It's about Ruth." Eliza tensed. "What about her?" Mary twisted her hands anxiously. "I shouldn't be saying this. If your mother found out—" "Please, Mary," Eliza urged. "If you know something, you must tell me." After another nervous glance down the hall, Mary stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. "She's not dead, Miss Eliza," Mary whispered. "Ruth is alive." "Alive?" Eliza gasped, clutching Mary's arm. "Are you certain?" Mary nodded, her eyes wide with the weight of her secret. "I saw her myself 2 nights ago. She's hiding in the old tobacco shed at the edge of the property, the one that hasn't been used since last season. But the overseer said they found her body," Eliza whispered, afraid to believe this miracle. "It wasn't her," Mary explained in a rush. "It was another woman who ran away from the Wilson plantation last month. They found her in that cabin, already dead from fever, but her face—" Mary hesitated. "The animals had been at her, Miss Eliza. Her face was unrecognizable. The overseer just assumed it was Ruth because of the whip marks on her back." Hope flared in Eliza's chest, so powerful it was almost painful. "Ruth is alive," she repeated, tears filling her eyes. "But how? Who's helping her?" "Mr. Samuel," Mary whispered. "Samuel? Our butler." Eliza was stunned. Samuel had served the Brooks family for over 20 years, always proper and dignified. He had never shown any particular kindness to the other enslaved people. Mary nodded. "He's been taking her food and medicine for her wounds." He told me because he needed help gathering supplies without raising suspicion. But why would he risk so much to help her? Mary's voice dropped even lower. Ruth is his daughter, Miss Eliza. The revelation hit Eliza like a physical blow. His daughter? But they never acknowledged each other, never spoke beyond what was necessary for their duties. It was safer that way, Mary explained. Mr. Samuel was brought to this plantation when Ruth was just a baby. Her mother was sold away when Ruth was 10. He's been watching over her from a distance all these years. Eliza's mind raced with this new information. So many things suddenly made sense. Samuel's occasional protective glances toward Ruth, the extra food that sometimes appeared in the servants' quarters when Ruth was working late. "I need to see her," Eliza said, already moving toward her wardrobe to find cloak. Mary grabbed her arm. "You can't, Miss Eliza. Your mother has Thomas watch day and night now. If you disappear, even for an hour, she'll know something's wrong." Eliza stopped, remembering her mother's threat. "Thomas, is he safe?" "For now," Mary replied. "But Mrs. Brooks has been watching him closely. Yesterday, she had the overseer give him 10 lashes just for dropping a basket of cotton." Anger and helplessness warred within Eliza. "This is all my fault. Ruth is injured and hiding. Thomas is being punished, and it's because of me." "Ruth doesn't blame you," Mary said gently. "She made me promise to tell you that. She says what happened between you was her choice, too." Tears streamed down Eliza's face. "I need to help her somehow. She can't stay in that shed forever." "Mr. Samuel has a plan," Mary said. "He's arranged for Ruth to travel north with a group of runaways next week. There's a man coming, someone who helped slaves escape to free states." "A conductor on the Underground Railroad," Eliza whispered, remembering something she'd read in one of Aunt Margaret's letters. Mary nodded. "But Ruth won't go without her brother. She says she won't leave Thomas behind. And if Thomas disappears, my mother will know I had something to do with it," Eliza said, understanding the impossible situation. For a long moment, both women were silent, the weight of their dilemma hanging heavy in the air. "I need to think," Eliza finally said. "There must be a way to help them both escape without my parents suspecting my involvement." "Be careful, Miss Eliza," Mary warned. "Your mother sees more than you think." After Mary left, Eliza paced her room, her mind working frantically. Ruth was alive. That miracle alone gave her renewed strength. But how could she help Ruth and Thomas escape without bringing her mother's wrath down on them all? There was another knock at her door, more forceful this time. Eliza opened it to find her mother standing there, her face tight with suspicion. "What was that girl doing in your room?" Mrs. Brooks demanded, pushing past Eliza into the bedroom. "Mary? She was just bringing fresh towels." Eliza lied, gesturing to the stack of linens Mary had thought to leave as cover for her visit. Mrs. Brooks narrowed her eyes, clearly unconvinced. "You were talking for quite some time about towels." "I asked her about some of the wedding preparations." Eliza improvised. "The servants often hear things that might not reach me directly." "What things?" Mrs. Brooks asked sharply. "Just details about the flowers, the menu. I want to make sure everything would please Mr. Carter." The lie tasted bitter on Eliza's tongue. Mrs. Brooks studied her daughter's face for a long moment. "You've changed, Eliza. This sudden interest in your wedding, after weeks of sulking, it makes me wonder what you're planning." "I'm not planning anything, Mother," Eliza said, forcing herself to meet her mother's gaze steadily. "I've simply accepted my future." "Have you?" Mrs. Brooks moved to Eliza's dressing table, idly touching the perfume bottles arranged there. "Because I think you're hiding something, and I intend to find out what it is." With that ominous statement, she left, closing the door firmly behind her. Eliza sank onto her bed, trembling. Her mother's suspicions made everything more dangerous. She needed to be extremely careful about how she proceeded. That night, she couldn't sleep, her mind filled with thoughts of Ruth hiding in the old tobacco shed, injured and afraid. The idea that Samuel, proper, dignified Samuel, was Ruth's father and had been secretly protecting her all these years added another layer to the deception that surrounded life at Willow Creek Plantation. By morning, Eliza had formed a tentative plan. It was risky, but it might be the only way to help Ruth and Thomas escape without implicating herself. After breakfast, she sought out Mr. Carter, who had taken to visiting the plantation daily to oversee wedding preparations. "James," she said, using his first name with deliberate intimacy, "I've been thinking about our future home." Mr. Carter looked pleased by her apparent interest. "Have you, my dear? I'm glad to hear it." "Yes," Eliza continued, forcing warmth into her voice. "I was wondering about the household staff. Will we bring any servants from here, or will you hire new ones in Charleston?" "I hadn't given it much thought," Mr. Carter admitted. "My bachelor household is quite small. We would certainly need to expand it for a wife of your standing." Eliza took a deep breath. "I was hoping we might bring Thomas, the young field hand. He's strong and learns quickly. I think he would be quite useful around your property." Mr. Carter's eyebrows rose. "A specific request for a field slave? That's unusual for a lady." "He's reliable," Eliza said carefully. "I've noticed his work when riding around the plantation. I believe he would serve us well." Mr. Carter studied her face, his expression calculating. This wouldn't have anything to do with his sister, the runaway seamstress, would it? Eliza's heart skipped a beat. His sister? "Come now, Eliza," Mr. Carter said, his voice soft but dangerous. "Your father told me everything about your unfortunate attachment. I know all about Ruth and her brother Thomas." Eliza felt cold fear spreading through her chest. "I merely thought he would be a good addition to our household staff." "I'm sure you did." Mr. Carter's smile didn't reach his eyes. "As it happens, I think it's an excellent idea. Having the boy in Charleston would ensure your good behavior, wouldn't it? A sort of insurance policy, if you will." The cruel calculation behind his words made Eliza's skin crawl. Mr. Carter intended to use Thomas as leverage against her, just as her mother had done. "I don't know what you mean," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I think you do." Mr. Carter took her hand, his grip uncomfortably tight. "Let me be clear, Eliza. I know about your unnatural feelings for that slave girl. I'm willing to overlook this aberration because of your family's position and the advantages our marriage brings to both our families. But once we are wed, such behavior will not be tolerated. The boy will serve as a reminder of that." Eliza stared at him, truly seeing the man she was to marry for the first time. Behind his handsome face and polished manners lay a calculating cruelty that chilled her to the bone. "I understand," she said softly, already knowing her original plan would not work. If Thomas came to their household in Charleston, he would be a prisoner, not a step closer to freedom. "Good." Mr. Carter released her hand with a satisfied smile. "I've spoken with the minister. He's agreed to perform our ceremony next Saturday, just 10 days from now." "So soon?" Eliza couldn't hide her dismay. "Your parents and I agree it's the best." Mr. Carter's tone made it clear that her opinion was irrelevant. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have business to discuss with your father." As he walked away, Eliza felt as though the walls of her life were closing in around her. Her wedding was now just 10 days away. Ruth was in hiding. Thomas was being watched, and Mr. Carter had revealed himself to be even more dangerous than she had feared. She needed a new plan, and quickly. That afternoon, Eliza requested permission to visit the plantation office, claiming she wanted to review some household accounts in preparation for managing her own home. To her surprise, her father agreed readily. "It's good to see you taking an interest in practical matters," Mr. Brooks said approvingly. "The ledgers are all there on the shelf. Samuel will assist you if you need anything." The plantation office was a small building separate from the main house, filled with the musty smell of paper and leather-bound books. Samuel stood at attention near the door, his face expressionless as always. "Thank you, Father," Eliza said. "I won't be long." Once her father had left, Eliza turned to Samuel, her heart pounding. She had never seen the butler as Ruth's father before, but now she searched his face for any resemblance. It was there in the shape of their eyes, the proud set of their shoulders. "Samuel," she began hesitantly, "I need to speak with you about an important matter." "Of course, Miss Eliza," he replied, his voice giving nothing away. "How may I assist you?" Eliza glanced toward the window to ensure no one was nearby. "Mary told me about Ruth," she said quietly. "I know she's alive, and I know you're helping her." Samuel's composed expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about, Miss Eliza." "Please," Eliza pleaded. "We don't have time for pretense. I know Ruth is your daughter, and I know she's hiding in the old tobacco shed. I want to help her escape, her and Thomas both." For a long moment, Samuel said nothing, his dark eyes assessing her carefully. Then, so subtly she almost missed it, he gave a small nod. "The walls have ears, Miss Eliza," he said quietly. "It would be better to discuss household accounts, as you told your father." Understanding his caution, Eliza moved to the ledger shelf. "Could you show me the plantation accounts from this year? I'd like to understand how the household expenses are organized." "Of course." Samuel pulled down a large leather-bound book and placed it on the desk. As Eliza opened it, he spoke in a near whisper. "Ruth's condition is worsening. The infection from the whipping. She needs a doctor." Eliza's heart clenched with fear. "Can you get medicine from Dr. Wilson's office?" "I've tried," Samuel replied, his voice heavy with worry. "But it's not enough. And the man who's coming to guide them north won't arrive until next Thursday, just 2 days before your wedding." Eliza flipped through the ledger pages, pretending to study the columns of figures. "And Thomas, the overseer watches him constantly. Getting him away without raising an alarm will be nearly impossible." As Eliza turned another page, her eye caught a notation that made her blood run cold. There, in her father's precise handwriting, was an entry about Thomas. "Troublesome. Consider discipline transferred to Georgia operation after harvest." "Samuel," she whispered, pointing to the entry, "did you know about this?" The butler's face betrayed a flicker of pain before his mask of composure returned. "I had heard rumors. This confirms it." Eliza felt sick. Her father intended to send Thomas away regardless of her cooperation. The threat had never been idle. "When is the harvest complete?" she asked urgently. 2 days from now," Samuel replied. "The last field will be picked clean by Thursday evening. The timing couldn't be worse. Thomas might be sent away before the Underground Railroad conductor even arrived." "We need to move more quickly," Eliza said, her mind racing. "Ruth and Thomas need to leave before Thursday." "How?" Samuel asked. "The regular routes aren't safe without a guide, and Ruth is too weak to travel quickly." Eliza stared at the ledger, an idea forming. "My wedding gifts," she said slowly. "They've already started arriving. Mr. Carter's coach comes every day bringing packages from Charleston. What if—" Samuel's eyes widened as he understood. "Hide them among the gifts being returned to Charleston? It's extremely dangerous, Miss Eliza." "But possible," she insisted. "Mr. Carter's driver always stops at the Cross Creek Tavern on his return journey. If someone were waiting there to help Ruth and Thomas continue north." "It might work," Samuel admitted. "But who would meet them? And how would we get them into the coach without being seen?" Eliza thought quickly. "I need to see Ruth. Tonight, we'll make the plan together." Samuel looked alarmed. "Your mother has the house watched. She suspects something." "I'll find a way," Eliza promised. "Just tell me when it's safe to come to the tobacco shed." Before Samuel could respond, the office door opened and Mrs. Brooks walked in. Eliza and Samuel immediately stepped apart, but suspicion in Mrs. Brooks' eyes suggested she had sensed a conspiracy between them. "Eliza, what are you doing in here? I've been looking everywhere for you." Mrs. Brooks' gaze shifted to Samuel. "You may return to the house now, Samuel. I need to speak with my daughter alone." "Yes, ma'am," Samuel replied with a slight bow, his face once again an unreadable mask. As he left, he carefully closed the ledger, hiding the damning entry about Thomas. Mrs. Brooks watched him go, then turned to Eliza. "What were you discussing with Samuel? And don't tell me it was household accounts." "That's exactly what it was," Eliza replied, struggling to keep her voice calm. "I wanted to understand how to manage staff expenses before I have my own household. You've never shown interest in such matters before, Mrs. Brooks observed coldly. This sudden change in behavior, first with the wedding preparations, now with household accounts. It's too convenient, Eliza. I'm simply trying to prepare for my new life, Eliza said, meeting her mother's gaze. Isn't that what you wanted? Mrs. Brooks moved closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. What I want is for you to stop whatever scheme you're hatching. Yes, I know you're planning something. I see it in your eyes. Mother, no more lies. Mrs. Brooks cut her off. Listen carefully, Eliza. If you do anything at all, to jeopardize this marriage, I will make sure that boy Thomas suffers in ways you cannot imagine. And if by some miracle you think you've found Ruth, remember that there are fates worse than a whipping or being sold south. The naked threat in her mother's voice made Eliza's blood run cold. This wasn't just about family honor or social standing anymore. There was a personal viciousness in Mrs. Brooks' manner that Eliza had never seen before. Why do you hate her so much? Eliza asked, unable to stop herself. What has Ruth ever done to you? Something flickered in Mrs. Brooks' eyes, an emotion Eliza couldn't quite identify. Hate her? I don't waste emotions on slaves. But I will not allow one to corrupt my daughter and ruin our family standing. It's more than that, Eliza insisted, suddenly certain. This isn't just about me or the family name. It's personal for you. Mrs. Brooks' hand struck Eliza's face with such force that she stumbled backward against the desk. Never question me again, she hissed. You know nothing about my reasons. Holding her stinging cheek, Eliza stared at her mother in shock. In that moment of uncontrolled rage, Mrs. Brooks had revealed more than she intended. Samuel, Eliza whispered as realization dawned. It's about Samuel, isn't it? Mrs. Brooks' face paled. What did that girl tell you? Nothing, Eliza said, the pieces falling into place. But I can see it now. The way you watch him, the way you've always been especially hard on Ruth. You have feelings for him, don't you? And you can't stand that he cares for his daughter more than he's ever cared for you. Enough! Mrs. Brooks' voice shook with fury. You will return to the house immediately. You are confined to your room until the wedding. The only exception will be for final dress fittings and when Mr. Carter visits. Is that understood? Without waiting for an answer, Mrs. Brooks gripped Eliza's arm painfully and marched her back to the main house. Servants scattered at their approach, sensing the dangerous tension between mother and daughter. In her room, Eliza heard the key turn in the lock, officially making her a prisoner. The brief hope she had felt at learning Ruth was alive had been replaced by a deeper desperation. Now she was trapped, unable to help Ruth or Thomas, and the clock was ticking toward both her dreaded wedding and Thomas's threatened transfer to Georgia. Hours passed as Eliza paced her room, trying to think of a way to escape and reach Ruth. The windows were too high to jump safely, and a servant had been stationed in the hallway outside her door. As darkness fell, Eliza pressed her ear to the door and heard the evening shift change. Jenkins, the elderly night watchman, relieving the younger servant who had been there all day. Jenkins was known for nodding off during his watch. If she waited until late night, she might have a chance to slip out unnoticed. But as she turned away from the door, a soft tapping sound came from her window. Startled, Eliza approached cautiously and peered out into the darkness. There, perched precariously on a branch of the old oak tree that grew near the house, was Thomas. His young face was tense with fear, but his eyes were determined as he motioned for her to open the window. Eliza quickly unlocked the window and pushed it open. Thomas, what are you doing here? It's dangerous. Miss Eliza, he whispered, his voice trembling slightly. Mr. Samuel sent me. He says you need to know. They're moving Ruth tonight. Your mother ordered the tobacco shed to be burned tomorrow morning. Burned? Eliza gasped. But that means... She knows, Thomas confirmed. Somehow, she knows Ruth is hiding there. Cold fear gripped Eliza's heart. Where are they taking her? There's a free black family that lives 10 miles north, beyond Cross Creek. They've agreed to hide her until conductor arrives. Thomas glanced nervously over his shoulder. Mr. Samuel says to tell you that Ruth is very sick. The infection is spreading. She might not. His young voice broke. She might not survive until conductor comes. Eliza finished, understanding the gravity of the situation. Thomas, I need to see her before they move her. Can you help me get out of here? Thomas hesitated. Miss Eliza, the overseer is watching the quarters extra close tonight. If I'm caught away from my bed... I know it's asking a lot, Eliza acknowledged, but this might be my only chance to see Ruth before my wedding. Please, Thomas. After a moment's consideration, the boy nodded. The branch is strong enough. You can climb out and down the tree. Eliza looked doubtfully at the distance to the branch. I've never climbed a tree in my life. I'll help you, Thomas promised, but we need to hurry. They're moving Ruth at midnight. With no time to waste, Eliza gathered her courage. She changed quickly into her simplest dress, one that wouldn't catch on branches, and tied her hair back. Then she climbed onto the windowsill, trying not to look down at the dizzying drop below. Thomas extended his hand, and Eliza reached for it, stretching as far as she could. Their fingers barely touched. You'll have to jump a little, Thomas whispered. Taking a deep breath, Eliza launched herself toward the branch. For one terrifying moment, she was suspended in air. Then Thomas caught her hand, and she crashed against the tree trunk, clinging desperately to the rough bark. I've got you, Thomas assured her, his young arms surprisingly strong as he helped her find secure footing on the branch. Now we go down one branch at a time. The descent was slow and frightening, with several near falls that left Eliza's heart pounding. But finally, they reached the ground, ducking into the shadows as a patrolling overseer passed nearby. This way, Thomas whispered, leading her through the darkness toward the servants' quarters. We need to move fast, but stay low. They crept through the plantation like shadows, freezing whenever they heard voices or footsteps. Thomas's knowledge of the guards' patterns proved invaluable as he guided Eliza safely past potential danger. Finally, they reached the old tobacco shed, a dilapidated structure at the far edge of property. Thomas knocked softly in a distinctive pattern, and the door opened just enough to let them slip inside. The interior was dark except for a single candle that cast long shadows across the dirt floor. Samuel stood by the door, his face grave, and there, lying on a makeshift bed of sacks and old blankets, was Ruth. Ruth, Eliza whispered, rushing to her side. The sight of her beloved made her heart twist with anguish. Ruth's face was flushed with fever, her eyes bright and unfocused. The simple dress she wore was damp with sweat, and when Eliza took her hand, it burned with unhealthy heat. Eliza? Ruth's voice was weak, uncertain. Is it really you? Yes, my love, it's me. Tears streamed down Eliza's face as she knelt beside the makeshift bed. I thought you were dead. When they said they'd found your body, Ruth managed a faint smile. Not yet, though this fever is trying its best. Samuel approached with a cup of water. She needs a drink, he said, his voice heavy with worry. The infection from the whipping has gotten into her blood. As Eliza helped Ruth drink, she noticed the angry red line spreading from beneath the bandages on Ruth's back. Blood poisoning, a deadly condition without proper medical care. We need to get her to a doctor, Eliza said urgently. No white doctor would treat her, Samuel replied. The family taking her in has a healer, but... He didn't finish the sentence, but his meaning was clear. It might already be too late. Then we need to leave now, Eliza insisted. Samuel shook his head. The patrol passes by in 10 minutes. We must wait until they're gone. Ruth's fingers tightened weakly around Eliza's. You shouldn't have come, she whispered. It's too dangerous. I had to see you, Eliza replied, brushing damp hair from Ruth's forehead. I couldn't bear to let you go without saying goodbye. Ruth's fever-bright eyes filled with tears. I dreamed of us, in another life, where we could be together without fear. We'll have that life, Eliza promised, though she knew it was likely a lie. Once you're well and safely north, I'll find a way to join you. Samuel and Thomas exchanged a glance that Eliza caught. They both knew how impossible such a future was. The patrol is coming, Thomas warned, peering through a crack in the wall. Everyone be quiet. They froze as the sound of men's voices and lantern light passed near the shed. Samuel extinguished their candle, plunging them into complete darkness. In the blackness, Eliza held Ruth's burning hand, willing her own strength into the woman she loved. When the patrol had passed, Samuel relit the candle. "It's time," he said gravely. "We need to move her now, while the path is clear." Thomas and Samuel had prepared a stretcher of sorts using an old door. They carefully moved Ruth onto it, each whimper of pain from her lips cutting into Eliza's heart like a knife. "I'm coming with you," Eliza said, rising to her feet. "Miss Eliza, you can't," Samuel protested. "If you're found missing in the morning—" "I don't care anymore," Eliza interrupted. "Ruth needs me. I can help carry the stretcher, make the journey faster." "And what about Thomas?" Samuel asked quietly. "If you disappear, your mother will take it out on him first." The truth of his words stopped Eliza cold. She looked at Thomas, his young face determined despite his fear, and knew she couldn't subject him to her mother's vengeance. "Then I'll return before dawn," she decided. "I'll help you get Ruth to safety. Then come back before anyone knows I'm gone." Samuel clearly wanted to argue further, but time was precious. "Very well," he finally agreed. "But at the first sign of trouble, you must turn back." Together, they lifted the makeshift stretcher, Samuel and Eliza taking the weight, while Thomas scouted ahead for danger. The night was mercifully cloudy, hiding the moon that might have revealed them to watchful eyes. Their progress was slow and difficult. Ruth's condition meant they had to move carefully, and the uneven ground made the stretcher unwieldy. Several times they had to stop and hide as patrols passed nearby, or when Ruth's pain became too intense to continue. After what seemed like hours, they reached a small creek that marked the boundary of Willow Creek Plantation. On the other side lay properties owned by smaller farmers, then unclaimed woods that stretched toward the next county. "We cross here," Samuel whispered. "The water is shallow enough to wade." As they prepared to cross, Ruth suddenly gripped Eliza's hand with surprising strength. "The plantation ledger," she gasped, her voice urgent despite her weakness. "You need to look at it again." "I did," Eliza told her. "I saw what they planned for Thomas. We're going to get him away, too, I promise." Ruth shook her head, frustration evident in her fevered eyes. "Not just that entry. The back pages, your mother's private accounts. Look there." Before Eliza could ask what she meant, Thomas hissed a warning from ahead. "Riders coming. Hide quickly." Samuel pulled him into a dense thicket of bushes beside the creek, laying the stretcher carefully on the ground. They crouched in tense silence as hoofbeats approached, then slowed. "They've stopped on the bridge," Thomas whispered, barely audible. "I think they're listening." Eliza's heart pounded so loudly she was certain it would give them away. Beside her, Ruth's breathing had grown labored, each exhale threatening to become a moan of pain. "I know you're out there," a voice called suddenly, making them all freeze. It was the plantation overseer. "The mistress knows the girl is alive, and she knows you're helping her. Samuel, show yourselves now, and perhaps she'll be merciful." Samuel's face hardened in the darkness. He squeezed Eliza's shoulder once, then stood up. "No," Eliza whispered frantically, trying to pull him back down. "They'll kill you." "Get Ruth to safety," Samuel replied quietly. "Take care of my children." Then, before Eliza could stop him, he stepped out of the bushes and into the open. "It's just me," they heard him call to the overseer. "The others are long gone. I stayed behind to lead you away from their trail." "A noble sacrifice," the overseer replied, his voice heavy with sarcasm. "Mrs. Brooks will be especially disappointed in you, Samuel. She had such high hopes." As Samuel was seized and bound, Eliza had to cover her mouth to hold back her sobs. Thomas wrapped his arms around her, his own tears falling silently. When the riders had departed with their prisoner, the 3 remaining fugitives sat in stunned silence. Ruth's face was wet with tears despite her fever. "He sacrificed himself for us," Thomas whispered, his young voice breaking. "For his children," Eliza corrected gently, remembering Samuel's last words. She looked at Thomas with new understanding. "Both his children." Thomas nodded, the family resemblance to Ruth suddenly clear in the set of his jaw. the shape of his eyes. "We need to keep moving," he said, wiping away his tears. "We can't let his sacrifice be for nothing." Together, Eliza and Thomas lifted Ruth's stretcher again and waded across the shallow creek. The water was cold, soaking their clothes to the knee, but they pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that safety and danger lay ahead in equal measure. On the far bank, Thomas led them along a narrow path through dense woods. "The Freeman's farm is about 2 miles this way," he explained. "They're expecting Ruth." As they walked, Eliza thought about Ruth's urgent words about the ledger. What had she been trying to tell her? What secret was hidden in Mrs. Brooks' private accounts? The night grew colder, and Ruth's condition worsened. Her brief moment of clarity had faded, replaced by delirious murmurings. Several times she called out for her father, unaware that Samuel had been captured. Finally, as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, they reached a small clearing where a modest farmhouse stood. A lantern burned in the window, despite the early hour, as if someone had been watching for their arrival. The door opened before they could knock, and an elderly black man stepped out, his face creased with concern. "You're later than expected," he said, ushering them inside. "My wife has prepared a place for the sick one." The farmhouse was simple but clean, with the comforting smell of herbs and fresh bread. An elderly woman directed them to a small bedroom, where they carefully laid Ruth on a real bed, the first she had slept in since her escape. "She's very ill," the woman observed, feeling Ruth's forehead. "I'll make a poultice of the infection, but she needs rest more than anything." Eliza knelt beside the bed, still holding Ruth's hand. "I can't stay much longer," she said, her voice breaking. "I have to return before they discover I'm gone." Ruth's eyes fluttered open, momentarily lucid. "Eliza," she whispered, "the ledger, you must look your mother's secret." "I will," Eliza promised, though she didn't understand. "Save your strength now." Ruth's hand tightened weakly around hers. "If I don't survive—" "Don't say that," Eliza interrupted, tears streaming down her face. "You'll recover. You'll go north and be free." "Listen," Ruth insisted, her voice fading. "If I don't survive, live your life. Eliza, don't let them cage your spirit the way they've caged your body." Eliza leaned down and pressed her lips gently to Ruth's burning forehead. "I love you," she whispered. "Hold on to that. No matter what happens, I will always love you." A faint smile touched Ruth's lips before her eyes closed again, exhaustion claiming her. The elderly woman touched Eliza's shoulder. "You need to go, child. The sun is rising, and they'll be looking for you soon." With infinite reluctance, Eliza rose from Ruth's bedside. Thomas stood in the doorway, his young face solemn. "I'll stay with her," he promised. "The Freemans have agreed to hide me until conductor comes." Eliza embraced him tightly. "Be careful, Thomas. Your sister needs you." "What will happen to my father?" he asked, his voice small. Eliza couldn't bear to give him false hope. "I don't know, but I'll do whatever I can to help him." The journey back to Willow Creek Plantation was a blur of exhaustion and grief. Mr. Freeman accompanied Eliza part of the way, guiding her through shortcuts until the plantation came into view. From there, she continued alone, her muddy dress and scratched hands testament to her night's adventure. The household was in an uproar when she finally slipped back through the gardens. Servants ran in all directions, and she could hear her mother's shrill voice ordering more searchers to the north fields. Taking advantage of the chaos, Eliza climbed the trellis beside the kitchen and managed to reach the second-floor hallway unseen. She had almost made it to her bedroom when a voice stopped her cold. "Where have you been, Eliza?" She turned slowly to face Mr. Carter, who stood watching her with cold, calculating eyes. "Your mother is quite distraught," he continued, taking in her disheveled appearance with evident displeasure. "Samuel has been caught helping the runaway slave escape, and now it appears you've been part of this plot as well." Eliza straightened her shoulders, too tired and heartsick to pretend any more. "What will you do? Call off the wedding? That would be a mercy I don't expect from you." Mr. Carter smiled thinly. "On the contrary, my dear, this only confirms that you need a firm hand to guide you. Our wedding will proceed as planned. But now, I believe we'll make our home in Savannah rather than Charleston, much farther from any northern influences. He took her arm in a painful grip, marching her toward her bedroom. Your mother believes you were kidnapped by Samuel as part of an escape plot. That's the story we'll tell everyone. Much more palatable than the truth, don't you agree? At her door, he leaned close, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. But know this, Eliza, as your husband, I will break this willful spirit of yours. By the time I'm finished, you won't remember the name of that slave girl, let alone pine for her. He shoved her into the bedroom and locked the door behind her. Alone again, Eliza sank to the floor, her body aching and her heart breaking. Ruth was safe for now, but desperately ill. Thomas was hidden, but for how long? Samuel had been captured, facing a punishment she couldn't bear to imagine, and she herself was trapped more completely than ever, with a wedding just days away that would deliver her into the hands of a man who had just revealed the full extent of his cruelty. As the morning sun streamed through her window, Eliza remembered Ruth's urgent words about the ledger. Whatever secret was hidden in those pages, she needed to discover it, and quickly. With her wedding now just 7 days away, time was running out for all of them. For 3 days, Eliza remained locked in her bedroom, allowed out only for meals under her mother's watchful eye. The story that Samuel had attempted to kidnap her had spread throughout the plantation, with embellishments that grew more dramatic with each telling. The poor dear. Eliza overheard one of the neighbor ladies saying during a visit, "Imagine being dragged to the woods by that butler. He always seemed so proper, too. You just never know with them." Mrs. Brooks played the role of the concerned mother perfectly, describing how worried she had been when she discovered Eliza missing from her bed. If the overseer hadn't caught Samuel trying to cross the creek with her, who knows what might have happened, she told her rapt audience. No one questioned why Samuel would have kidnapped the young mistress of the house, or how Eliza had managed to return on her own. The story was accepted because it confirmed what many already believed, that the enslaved people could not be trusted, that kindness toward them was misplaced. Through it all, Eliza said nothing, neither confirming nor denying her mother's tale. She ate little, spoke less, and spent her days staring out the window toward the north, wondering if Ruth still lived. Of Samuel, there was no word. He had been taken away in chains, his fate undisclosed even to the other house servants. Thomas's absence from the field had been explained as a sale to a neighboring plantation, a hasty transaction, but not unusual enough to raise suspicions. On the 4th day of her confinement, Eliza was summoned to the parlor for a final fitting of her wedding gown. The ceremony was now just 3 days away, and Mrs. Brooks was determined that everything would be perfect, regardless of the recent upheaval. "Stand still, Eliza," Mrs. Brooks scolded as the dressmaker pinned the delicate lace at the collar. "You've lost weight, and the bodice needs to be taken in." Eliza stood motionless, staring at her reflection in the mirror, without really seeing it. The white dress felt like a shroud, the veil like a funeral pall. "Mrs. Brooks," the dressmaker ventured hesitantly, "perhaps we could postpone the final fitting? Miss Eliza seems unwell." "Nonsense," Mrs. Brooks replied sharply. "My daughter is perfectly fine. She's simply experiencing wedding nerves, which is to be expected." When the dressmaker had finished and been dismissed, Mrs. Brooks circled Eliza slowly, examining the gown from every angle. "It will do," she finally declared. "Mr. Carter will be pleased." Eliza turned to face her mother, speaking for the first time that day. "Where's Samuel?" Mrs. Brooks' expression hardened. "That is no concern of yours." "He didn't kidnap me," Eliza said, her voice flat. "We both know that a lie." "It's the story that needed to be told," Mrs. Brooks replied coldly. "The alternative would destroy this family's reputation. What did you do to him?" Eliza persisted. Mrs. Brooks turned away, busying herself with the dress boxes. "He's been sold to a plantation in Louisiana. He'll never return to Virginia." Eliza felt the news like a physical blow. Louisiana was as good as a death sentence. The brutal conditions, the deadly fevers, the backbreaking labor in the sugar fields. Few survived more than a year or two. "You've killed him," she whispered, "as surely as if you'd put a gun to his head." Mrs. Brooks whirled around, her face flushed with anger. "He betrayed this family. After all the years of special treatment, the position of trust he held. He protected his daughter, Eliza interrupted, as any father would. A flash of something, pain perhaps, or jealousy, crossed Mrs. Brooks' face. So, you know about that? Yes, and I think you've known for years. Eliza took a step toward her mother. That's why you've always been especially hard on Ruth, isn't it? Because she's Samuel's daughter, and he loves her in a way he could never love you. Mrs. Brooks' hand struck Eliza's face with such force that one of the dress pins tore loose, leaving a thin line of blood on her cheek. You understand nothing, Mrs. Brooks hissed. Nothing about what I've endured, the humiliations I've suffered, your father's wandering eye, the whispers behind my back, and all the while Samuel watching me with that silent judgment of his. Eliza touched her bleeding cheek, a strange calm settling over her. Ruth said there was something in the plantation ledger, in your private accounts. What is it, Mother? What are you hiding? The color drained from Mrs. Brooks' face. She's lying. There's nothing. Then you won't mind if I look, Eliza replied, moving toward the door. Mrs. Brooks grabbed her arm. You will do no such thing. You'll go back to your room and stay there until your wedding day. If you cause any more trouble, I swear I'll find that girl and her brother and make them pay for it. How? Eliza challenged. You don't know where they are. A cold smile spread across Mrs. Brooks' face. Don't I? Did you think I wouldn't have them followed? I know exactly where Ruth is hiding. At the Freeman farm, just beyond Cross Creek. I've left her alone so far, because she's useful as leverage against you. But one word from me, and the slave catchers will be there within the hour. Eliza felt the blood drain from her face. You're bluffing. Am I? Mrs. Brooks reached into her dress pocket and withdrew a small object, holding it up for Eliza to see. It was a carved wooden bird, the one Thomas always carried, a gift from their mother before she was sold away. The boy dropped this in the woods. My men found it yesterday, along with tracks leading straight to the Freeman place. Horror and defeat washed over Eliza. Her mother had known all along, had been playing with her like a cat with a wounded mouse. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice hollow. I want you to be the daughter you were raised to be, Mrs. Brooks replied. Marry Mr. Carter without complaint. Be a proper wife. Forget this unnatural attachment. Do that, and I'll leave Ruth and her brother alone. They can make their way north for all I care, as long as they never return. And if I refuse, then I'll have them both brought back here and sold to separate plantations so far apart they'll never see each other again. Mrs. Brooks' voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing the weather rather than the destruction of two lives. Defeated, Eliza nodded. I'll do as you ask. Just leave them in peace. A wise decision. Mrs. Brooks unlocked the parlor door. You may return to your room now. Mr. Carter will visit tomorrow to discuss the final wedding arrangements. I expect you to be gracious. Back in her bedroom, Eliza sat by the window, watching the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the plantation grounds. Her mother's threat hung over her like a dark cloud, but something else nagged at her mind. Ruth's insistence about the ledger. What secret could be so important that Ruth would mention it even as she lay burning with fever? And then there was the question of how her mother had discovered Ruth was alive in the first place. Someone must have informed her, but who? The only people who knew were Mary, Samuel, and Thomas, and none of them would have betrayed Ruth willingly. As these thoughts circled in her mind, a soft knock sounded at her door. Eliza tensed, expecting her mother, but it was Jenkins, the elderly night watchman. Miss Eliza, he whispered, glancing nervously down the hallway. I have a message for you from Mary. Mary. Eliza hadn't seen the young servant since the night she had helped her reach Ruth. Is she all right? Jenkins nodded. She's been kept working in the laundry, away from the house. But she wanted you to know the butler left something for you before they took him away. Said you know what to do with it. What is it? Eliza asked eagerly. It's hidden in the library, behind the third volume of Gibbon's Decline and Fall. Said it was the only book your father never opens. Jenkins straightened as he heard footsteps approaching. I need to go. "Be careful, Miss Eliza." After he left, Eliza paced her room impatiently, waiting for night to fall. Whatever Samuel had left for her, it had to be important. Important enough for him to risk hiding it before his capture. When the house finally grew quiet and darkness settled over Willow Creek, Eliza tried her bedroom door. To her surprise, it was unlocked. Perhaps her mother believed her broken enough to be trusted, or perhaps Jenkins had returned to unlock it for her. Either way, it was an opportunity she couldn't waste. Moving silently through the darkened house, Eliza made her way to the library. The moonlight streaming through the tall windows provided just enough light to find a shelf with Gibbon's massive historical volumes. She pulled out the third book, and behind it, wedged against the back of the shelf, was a folded piece of paper. With trembling fingers, Eliza unfolded it to find a single page torn from the plantation ledger. One of the private accounts Ruth had mentioned. It was a record of payments, spanning many years, with an identical amount noted every 6 months. The recipient was listed only as SM. Confused, Eliza studied the page more closely. At the bottom, in a different hand, Samuel's careful script, was a brief note. Sarah Miller, Ruth's mother. Sold to Oakwood Plantation, 1843. Monthly letters arranged through Mr. Wilson. Mrs. B.S. on arrangement, unknown to Master. Understanding dawned slowly. S.M. was Sarah Miller, Ruth's mother, and Mrs. Brooks had been making payments to keep her somewhere nearby, to arrange her letters between her and Samuel, all without Mr. Brooks' knowledge. But why? What possible reason could her mother have for such an arrangement? The answer came in a flood of memories. Comments her mother had made over the years. The strange tension whenever Ruth's mother was mentioned. The way Mrs. Brooks watched Samuel with mixture of resentment and something else. She was keeping them apart, Eliza whispered to herself, making Samuel believe Ruth's mother was far away, while actually keeping her close enough to torture him with news of her. It was a cruelty so calculated, so personal, that it took Eliza's breath away. Her mother must have been in love with Samuel, or obsessed with him, at least, and his devotion to Ruth's mother had driven her to this vindictive scheme. The realization brought with it a powerful weapon. If her father learned of these unauthorized payments, of this deception that had gone on for years, the consequences for Mrs. Brooks would be severe. Mr. Brooks tolerated many things, but the misuse of plantation funds was not among them. Eliza carefully folded the page and slipped it into her dress pocket. She didn't know yet how she would use this information, but for the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of hope. The next morning, Mr. Carter arrived for his promised visit. Eliza received him in the garden, where they could walk among the winter-bare rose bushes under the watchful but distant eye of Mrs. Brooks. "You look pale, my dear," Mr. Carter observed, his tone suggesting disapproval rather than concern. "I hope you'll have more color in your cheeks for our wedding day." "I've been unwell," Eliza replied simply. "Yes, the ordeal with the butler." Mr. Carter shook his head. "A shocking business. But it only confirms what I've always believed. Too much lenience leads to such presumption. In our household, there will be stricter discipline." Eliza said nothing, her hand unconsciously touching the ledger page hidden in her dress pocket. "I've been considering our future," Mr. Carter continued, oblivious to her discomfort. "As I mentioned, I think Savannah would be more suitable than Charleston. My business associates, they're more aligned with my philosophical views." "Philosophical views?" Eliza echoed. "On the natural order of things," Mr. Carter explained with a thin smile. "The proper relationship between the races, between husband and wife. Savannah society is less infected with northern sentimentality." The meaning behind his words was clear. In Savannah, far from her family and everything familiar, Eliza would be completely under his control. Any rebellious tendencies would be swiftly and thoroughly crushed. "I see," she said quietly. "I'm glad you understand." Mr. Carter patted her hand condescendingly. "Your mother assures me you've come to your senses about the unfortunate attachment you formed. I'm willing to put behind us, provided there are no further incidents." As they completed their circuit of the garden, returning to where Mrs. Brooks waited on the veranda, Eliza made her decision. The ledger page burned in her pocket. a reminder of her mother's hypocrisy and cruelty. But using it would mean exposing Samuel's connection to Ruth and Sarah Miller, potentially putting Ruth and Thomas in even greater danger if her father decided to pursue them. What she needed was leverage over her mother alone, something that would force Mrs. Brooks to let Ruth and Thomas escape north without interference, while still allowing Eliza to avoid marriage to Mr. Carter. That evening, as Eliza picked at her dinner under her mother's watchful eye, an idea began to form. It was desperate and dangerous, but it might be her only chance. "Mother," she said suddenly, breaking the silence that had fallen over the dining room, "may I speak with you privately after dinner? About the wedding?" Surprised but pleased by this apparent cooperation, Mrs. Brooks nodded. "Of course, dear. We'll talk in my sitting room." An hour later, Eliza sat across from her mother in the small, elegantly appointed room where Mrs. Brooks conducted her private correspondence and household management. A small fire burned in the grate, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "I'm glad to see you're finally accepting your situation," Mrs. Brooks began. "Mr. Carter is most eager for the wedding. He's even arranged for a special license so that the ceremony can proceed without the usual waiting period." "I'm not going to marry him," Eliza said calmly. Mrs. Brooks' smile hardened. "We've been through this. Eliza, you will do as you're told, or you'll have Ruth and Thomas captured." Eliza finished for her. "Yes, I know, but I think you'll reconsider when you hear what I have to say." From her pocket, she withdrew the ledger page and placed it on the small table between them. Mrs. Brooks' face paled as she recognized it. "Where did you get that?" she demanded, reaching for the paper. Eliza pulled it back. "Samuel left it for me. He wanted to understand why you hate Ruth so much. Because every time you look at her, you see the woman Samuel loved instead of you." "You understand nothing," Mrs. Brooks hissed, but her composure had cracked. "I understand that you've been making secret payments to keep Sarah Miller nearby, all while letting Samuel believe she was so far away," Eliza continued. "I understand that you've been lying to Father about plantation funds for years. What would he say if he knew?" Mrs. Brooks' hands trembled. "You wouldn't dare." "I would," Eliza replied steadily, "unless we can come to an arrangement." "What arrangement?" Mrs. Brooks asked, her voice tight with suppressed fury. "I will go through with the wedding to Mr. Carter on one condition," Eliza said. "You will ensure that Ruth and Thomas make it safely north, beyond the reach of slave catchers. You will use your connections to get them across the border into Pennsylvania, and you will never pursue them." Mrs. Brooks laughed bitterly. "And why would I agree to that? Your father would be angry about the ledger, yes, but it would be my word against yours. A dutiful wife against a daughter who's clearly unstable, forming unnatural attachments to slaves." "It wouldn't just be my word," Eliza countered. "I wrote to Aunt Margaret's friends in Boston last month, telling them everything. About Ruth teaching me to read, about our feelings for each other, about your threats. I gave the letter to Mary to post when she visited her sister in town. It was a lie. Eliza had done no such thing, but the flash of alarm in her mother's eyes told her the bluff was working. Those northern abolitionists would love nothing more than a scandal involving a prominent Virginia family," Eliza continued. "Imagine the newspaper articles, the sermons preached against you in Boston churches. Father's business associates would abandon him. We'd be social outcasts." Mrs. Brooks' face had gone white. "You wouldn't destroy your own family." "I don't want to," Eliza said honestly. "That's why I'm offering this compromise. Help Ruth and Thomas reach safety, and I'll be the dutiful daughter you want. I'll marry Mr. Carter, I'll move to Savannah, and I'll never speak of any of this again." For a long moment, Mrs. Brooks stared at her daughter, as if seeing her for the first time. The girl she had raised to be meek and obedient was gone, replaced by a young woman with steel in her spine and calculation in her eyes, a mirror image of herself. "How do I know you haven't made copies of that ledger page?" she finally asked. "You don't," Eliza admitted. "But I give you my word. Help Ruth and Thomas, and I'll destroy it along with any copies." Mrs. Brooks rose and paced the window, staring out into the darkness. "Even if I agreed, how would I arrange such a thing? The Underground Railroad is hardly something a plantation mistress can openly contact. The conductor is coming to the Freeman farm tomorrow night. Eliza said. Send word to your men to stay away from that area. That's all you need to do. After what seemed like an eternity, Mrs. Brooks turned back to face her daughter. Very well. I'll recall the men watching the Freeman place. But in return, you will be the perfect bride. You will smile at the wedding. You will go with Mr. Carter without complaint, and you will never, ever speak of Ruth again. Are we clear? Perfectly, Eliza replied, relief washing over her. It wasn't the outcome she had dreamed of, but it would keep Ruth and Thomas safe. That was what mattered most. Mrs. Brooks held out her hand for the ledger page. I'll take that now. Not yet, Eliza said, tucking it back into her pocket. I'll give it to you after the wedding, when I know Ruth and Thomas are safely away. A flash of grudging respect crossed Mrs. Brooks' face. You become quite the negotiator. I wonder where you learned such skills. From watching you, Mother, Eliza replied simply. The day of the wedding dawned clear and cold. Eliza stood at her bedroom window, watching the early preparations in the garden below. Despite the winter season, Mrs. Brooks had insisted on an outdoor ceremony, with braziers to warm the small gathering of guests. As promised, Eliza had been the model of cooperation since her agreement with her mother. She had attended final fittings without complaint, greeted Mr. Carter with practiced smiles, and said all the right things to visiting relatives who arrived for the ceremony. Inside, however, she felt nothing but hollowness. She had received no word about Ruth's condition, no confirmation that she and Thomas had safely departed with the Underground Railroad conductor. All she had was her mother's reluctant promise and a desperate hope that it would be kept. Mary helped Eliza dress for the ceremony, her young face solemn as she arranged the wedding veil. Any news? Eliza whispered as Mary pinned the delicate lace in place. Nothing certain, Mary replied softly. But Jenkins heard from one of the field hands that the Freeman place was quiet last night. No slave catchers, no disturbance. It wasn't much, but it was something. If Mrs. Brooks had kept her word, Ruth and Thomas might already be on their way north, traveling under cover of darkness toward freedom. It's time, Miss Eliza, Mary said, stepping back to survey her work. They're waiting for you downstairs. Eliza took a deep breath, steadying herself. Thank you, Mary, for everything. Mary's eyes filled with tears. I wish things could be different. So do I, Eliza replied softly. But at least Ruth and Thomas have a chance now. That's something. Downstairs, Mr. Brooks waited to escort his daughter to the garden. He had been largely absent during the upheaval of the past weeks, uncomfortable with the emotional aspects of the situation, and content to let his wife handle matters. You look beautiful, Eliza, he said awkwardly. Carter is a fortunate man. Thank you, Father, Eliza replied mechanically. As they stepped outside, the small gathering of guests turned to watch the bride's approach. Mr. Carter stood waiting at the flower-decorated arbor, his expression one of satisfied possession rather than love. Mrs. Brooks sat in the front row, her face a mask of proper maternal pride. But as Eliza passed, their eyes met briefly, and a silent message passed between them. The bargain held on both sides. The minister began the ceremony, his words drifting over Eliza as if from a great distance. She responded when prompted, her voice clear but empty of emotion. Mr. Carter squeezed her hand too tightly when he placed a ring on her finger, a subtle reminder of the control he would soon exercise over every aspect of her life. If anyone can show just cause why this man and this woman should not be joined in holy matrimony, the minister intoned, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. A moment of silence followed, broken only by the rustling of winter-bare branches in the light breeze. Eliza stared at the ground, her heart pounding with a desperate, irrational hope that someone would object, that something would stop this travesty of a marriage. Very well, the minister continued. James Carter, do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part? I do, Mr. Carter replied firmly. And do you, Eliza Brooks, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, from this day forward, for better or worse, for for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love, cherish, and obey, till death do you part. Eliza opened her mouth to speak the words that would seal her fate. But as she did, her gaze fell on the elderly butler who had replaced Samuel, standing at attention near the house. In his hands was a Bible, Samuel's Bible, which had been left behind when he was taken away. In that moment, something inside Eliza broke free. All the careful plans, the desperate bargaining, the sacrifice she had been prepared to make, it all fell away, leaving only a simple, uncompromising truth. "No," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I do not." A collective gasp rose from the assembled guests. Mr. Carter's grip on her hand became painfully tight. "Eliza," Mrs. Brooks hissed, half rising from her seat. "What are you doing?" Eliza gently but firmly extracted her hand from Mr. Carter's grasp. "I cannot marry this man. I do not love him, and I never will." "This is outrageous," Mr. Carter sputtered, his face flushing with anger and humiliation. "Mr. Brooks, control your daughter." But Eliza was already backing away from the arbor, removing the veil from her head. "I'm sorry for the embarrassment this causes," she said, addressing the shocked guests. "But I cannot live a lie, not even to please my family." "Eliza, think about what you're doing," her father pleaded, moving toward her. "Think about your future." "I am thinking about my future," Eliza replied. "And I won't spend it trapped in a loveless marriage, slowly die inside while pretending to be someone I'm not." Mrs. Brooks pushed past the other guests to reach her daughter. "You foolish girl," she said in a low, furious voice. "Have you forgotten our arrangement? What about the consequences for those people you care about?" "I haven't forgotten," Eliza said quietly. "But I realized something this morning. You need my silence as much as I need yours. If you harm Ruth or Thomas, I'll have nothing left to lose. I'll tell everyone about Sarah Miller and the payments you've been making all these years." Mrs. Brooks' face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful—" "Let her go, Catherine," Mr. Brooks interrupted, surprising everyone. He looked tired and suddenly old. "There's been enough drama in this family." "Edward, you can't possibly—" "I said let her go." Mr. Brooks' voice was firm. "The wedding is off. Mr. Carter, I apologize for the inconvenience. We'll, of course, compensate you for any expenses incurred." Mr. Carter looked from father to daughter, his expression hardening into cold fury. "Keep your money," he said stiffly. "But remember this day, Eliza. You've made an enemy you'll regret." With that, he stalked away, followed by his embarrassed relatives. The other guests began to disperse as well, murmuring among themselves about the scandal they had just witnessed. Left alone with her parents, Eliza faced her anger with a calmness she hadn't known she possessed. "I'll pack my things," she said. "I know I can't stay here after this." "Where will you go?" her father asked, more curious and concerned. "To Boston," Eliza replied. "Aunt Margaret's friends will take me in, I'm sure." Mrs. Brooks laughed bitterly. "Those abolitionists, they'll welcome you with open arms, no doubt. The Southern belle who rejected her family for the love of a slave girl. What a story they'll make of you." "Let them," Eliza said simply. "At least I'll be living honestly." She turned to go back to the house, but her father's voice stopped her. "Was it worth it?" he asked. "Throwing away your future, your family, your position in society, all for some misguided attachment?" Eliza looked back at him, at the man who had always been a distant figure in her life, more concerned with cotton prices than with his daughter's happiness. "Yes," she said softly, "because for the first time in my life, I'm choosing my own path. And that's worth everything." 3 days later, Eliza stood on the porch of the main house, a single trunk containing her few personal possessions at her feet. The carriage that would take her to Richmond, where she would board a northbound train, waited in the driveway. Mrs. Brooks had refused to see her off, locking herself in her room after a final, bitter argument. Mr. Brooks had provided funds for her journey, less than she might have expected as a dowry, but enough to establish herself modestly in Boston until she could find employment. "You're making a mistake, Eliza," he said as they stood on the porch. "Carter would have given you a good life." "A comfortable cage is still a cage, father," Eliza replied. He sighed, shaking his head at what he saw as youthful foolishness. Right when you're settled. Your mother may come around eventually. Eliza doubted that very much, but she nodded. Goodbye, father. As she turned to go, Jenkins approached, carrying a package wrapped in brown paper. This came for you yesterday, Miss Eliza, he said, glancing nervously at Mr. Brooks. I kept it safe, like you asked. Eliza hadn't asked for any package to be held, but something in Jenkins' expression told her to play along. Thank you, Jenkins. I appreciate your thoughtfulness. She took the package and climbed into the waiting carriage. As it pulled away from Willow Creek Plantation, Eliza felt a curious mixture of grief and liberation. She was leaving behind everything she had ever known, facing an uncertain future alone. Yet her heart felt lighter than it had in months. Once the plantation was out of sight, Eliza carefully unwrapped the mysterious package. Inside was a Bible, not Samuel's, as she had first thought when she saw it at the wedding, but an older, more worn copy. Ruth's Bible, the tattered one her mother had used to teach her to read. With trembling fingers, Eliza opened it. There, in the margins of the first page, written in Ruth's careful handwriting, was a single word, still. Tears filled Eliza's eyes as she traced the word with her fingertip. Below it, she noticed a small notation, an address in Philadelphia, nothing more. Hope bloomed in her chest, fragile but persistent. Ruth was alive. She had made it north with Thomas, and she had found a way to let Eliza know where to find her. Taking a pencil from her reticule, Eliza wrote a single word beneath Ruth's. Yours. The journey north would be long and difficult. The life awaiting her would be nothing like the one she had been raised to expect. There would be hardships, prejudices to overcome, new skills to learn. But for the first time, Eliza would be living according to her own truth, not someone else's expectations. And somewhere in Philadelphia, Ruth was waiting. 6 months later, on a warm spring evening, Eliza stood on a quiet street in Philadelphia, checking the address in her hand against the simple row house before her. After months of searching, of carefully worded inquiries and patient waiting, she had finally found the place. Her life in Boston had not been easy. Aunt Margaret's friends had indeed welcomed her, but their charity had its limits. Eliza had taken work as a teacher's assistant at a small school for girls, learning as much as she taught. Her southern accent and mannerisms marked her as an outsider, and rumors about why she had fled Virginia followed her like a shadow. But she had persevered, saving every penny she could for this journey to Philadelphia, clinging to the hope represented by that single word in the margin of Ruth's Bible. Now, standing before the unassuming door, Eliza felt a moment of doubt. What if Ruth didn't want to see her? What if the word in the Bible had meant something else entirely? What if Ruth had continued north to Canada, or changed her name, or... The door opened before she could knock, and there stood Thomas, taller than she remembered, his thin face showing the first signs of manhood. He stared at Eliza in shock. "Miss Eliza," he whispered, glancing quickly up and down the street. "Is it really you?" "Hello, Thomas," she replied, smiling through her tears. "You look well." He hesitated only a moment before stepping back to let her enter. "She never believed you'd come," he said as he closed the door behind her, "but she left the address anyway, just in case." "Is she?" Eliza couldn't finish the question, too afraid of the answer. Thomas nodded, understanding her fear. She recovered. It was close for a while. The fever nearly took her, but the Quaker woman who took us in new medicines the plantation doctors never used. By the time we reached Philadelphia, Ruth was strong enough to walk on her own. Relief washed over Eliza like a wave. "And you've been safe here? No one has come looking for you." "We had to move twice," Thomas admitted. "Slave catchers came to the neighborhood asking questions. But this street is mostly colored folks and poor whites. People mind their own business." He led her through the small, neat house to a back room that opened onto a tiny garden. There, seated at a table with her back to the door, was Ruth. She was sewing by the last light of day, her head bent over her work, unaware of the visitor. Her hair was styled differently, and she wore a simple dress of the kind free black women in the North favored, but Eliza would have known her anywhere. "Ruth," she called softly. "It's me." Ruth froze, then slowly turned, her eyes widening in disbelief. Eliza. For a moment, neither woman moved. Then Ruth was on her feet, crossing the room in quick strides, and Eliza was in her arms. They clung to each other, both weeping, too overwhelmed for words. Thomas quietly withdrew, closing the door to give them privacy. "I didn't think you'd come," Ruth finally said, pulling back just enough to look at Eliza's face. "I hoped, but I didn't dare believe it. I couldn't go through with the wedding," Eliza explained, "not even to keep our bargain. I stood at the altar and realized I couldn't live a lie, not even for you." Ruth touched Eliza's cheek gently. "What happened? Was there trouble?" "Scandal, embarrassment, my mother's fury," Eliza admitted with a small smile. "But in the end, my father let me go. I've been in Boston, working and searching for you. And now you found me," Ruth said, wonder in her voice. "But what happens next, Eliza? This isn't Virginia, but it's not paradise either. People here have their own prejudices." "I know," Eliza acknowledged. "It won't be easy, but we've both learned to live with difficulty, haven't we? At least here, we can face it together in whatever way is possible." Ruth's eyes searched hers. "Are you sure? This life, my life, it's nothing like what you were raised for." "I'm sure of only one thing," Eliza replied, "that I want to be where you are. The rest we'll figure out as we go." Ruth smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed her face. "Then welcome home, Eliza." They sat in the small garden as twilight deepened into night, talking of all that had happened since their separation. Ruth told of their harrowing journey north, of the conductor who had guided them through Maryland, of the Quaker-safe houses where they had hidden during daylight hours. "And Thomas?" Eliza asked. "He seems well. He's apprenticed to a carpenter," Ruth said proudly. "The man knows Thomas is a runaway, but he doesn't care. Says Thomas has the best eye for detail he's ever seen." "And you? What do you do here?" Ruth gestured to the sewing on the table. "What I've always done. But now I'm paid for it. Not much, but enough to rent this room and feed ourselves." "Have you heard anything of your father?" Eliza asked hesitantly. Pain flashed across Ruth's face. "Nothing certain. A man who escaped from a Louisiana plantation last year thought he recognized the name, but couldn't say for sure if Samuel was still alive." Eliza took Ruth's hand, offering what comfort she could. "He was so brave, Ruth. He saved you both." "I know," Ruth whispered. "I pray for him every day." As the night grew cooler, they moved inside. The room was small but meticulously clean, with a curtain dividing the sleeping area from the small kitchen space. On a shelf near the bed sat Ruth's Bible, well-worn but carefully preserved. "You found my message," Ruth said, following Eliza's gaze. "It gave me hope when I needed it most," Eliza replied. One word, but it said everything. Ruth took the Bible down from the shelf, opening it to a page marked with a ribbon. "I've been writing more than one word," she admitted, "ever since I was strong enough to hold a pencil again." Eliza looked at the page, her heart swelling as she saw the tiny script filling the margins. Poems, thoughts, and memories, all addressed to her. Words too dangerous to speak in Virginia, preserved here in this sacred space between the printed verses. "I wrote back," she said, reaching into her pocket for the small notebook she had carried since leaving Willow Creek. "Every day, something I wished I could tell you." They sat side by side on Ruth's narrow bed, sharing the words they had written to each other across the miles and months of separation. Outside, Philadelphia continued its evening routines. Cartwheels on cobblestones, distant voices, the lamplighter making his rounds. But in the small room, there was only the two of them, finally free to speak the truth that had always lived in their hearts. "What will you do now?" Ruth asked eventually. "Will you return to Boston?" Eliza shook her head. "My place is here if you'll have me. I can find work teaching. There are schools for colored children that need teachers." "It won't be easy," Ruth warned again. "Two women living together, one white, one colored. People will talk." "Let them," Eliza said simply. "We've survived worse than gossip." Ruth smiled, taking Eliza's hand in hers. "Then stay. We'll face whatever comes together." As night deepened around them, they sat close together, their shoulders touching, reading aloud from the margins of Ruth's Bible, the secret history of their love, preserved in ink and cherished memory. The future remained uncertain, filled with challenges they could only begin to imagine. But they had found each other against impossible odds, and that was miracle enough for now. In the soft candlelight, Eliza thought of all they had endured, the forbidden lessons that had brought them together, the cruelty that had tried to tear them apart, the courage that had led them both to freedom. Their story was far from over, but its foundation was secure, built on the most enduring lesson of all, that love, once awakened, could not be silenced or denied. And in the margins of life, in the spaces between what the world allowed and what the heart demanded, they had found their own truth, written in whispers, in glances, in words carefully inscribed where only they would see. It was enough. It would always be enough.